In a distant future, humanity had reached the stars. They had left behind their old home, Earth, which was now nothing more than a dusty memory. A planet that once thrived, but had been drained of all life by centuries of greed and misuse. Now, instead of one world, humans lived on hundreds of planets scattered across the galaxy. These colonies were part of something bigger called the Galactic Concord, a massive alliance of different alien races who ruled over space like an interstellar. Government. The Concord wasn't perfect, though. To many aliens, humans were seen as reckless troublemakers. Their history spoke for itself: wars, pollution, overpopulation, and eventually the complete destruction of their own planet. The other species in the Concord looked down on them, treating humans almost like children, capable of great things but too unpredictable to trust fully. One of these human colonies was Elysian Prime, a shining jewel among the stars. It was known for its advanced technology, beautiful cities floating above oceans, and a culture that blended art with science. People there felt proud to be human, despite what others thought about them. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Humans didn't always agree with the rules set by the Concord, and some even whispered about breaking away entirely. At the center of this story is Kale, a man whose life changed forever because of one mistake. He wasn't a hero or a leader. He was just an engineer trying to make ends meet. Kale worked at a research facility on Elysian Prime, where scientists were experimenting with a new kind of energy source. This energy could power entire planets without harming the environment. A dream come true for a species still haunted by the scars of Earth's collapse. But dreams can turn into nightmares if you're not careful. One day, during a routine test, something went horribly wrong. The machine malfunctioned, unleashing a wave of destructive energy that spread far beyond Elysian Prime. Neighboring planets, belonging to other alien species, were devastated. Cities crumbled, ecosystems collapsed, and countless lives were lost. The damage was catastrophic, and when the dust settled, the blame fell squarely on humanity. The Galactic Concord wasted no time. Within days, they declared all humans banished. Every single colony, every ship, every person, they were cast out of the Concord's territory. Trade routes were cut off, communication channels blocked, and any remaining resources seized. Overnight, billions of people found themselves abandoned, left to survive in the darkest corners of space with no help and no hope. For Kale, the guilt weighed heavily. He knew he hadn't caused the disaster intentionally, but it didn't matter. His work had been part of the project, and now his hands felt stained with the blood of millions. As chaos erupted around him, Kale tried to disappear, retreating to the edges of society. But fate had other plans. Survival became the only thing that mattered for the banished humans. Without access to food, medicine, or fuel, colonies began to fall apart. Some turned to scavenging, raiding derelict ships and abandoned stations for scraps. Others banded together, forming small communities in the most desolate parts of space. Among these survivors, rumors started to circulate about a hidden archive, an ancient repository of human knowledge buried somewhere deep in the galaxy. Some believed it held secrets from Earth's golden age, while others claimed it contained blueprints for weapons, powerful enough to take back what had been stolen. Kale initially wanted nothing to do with these stories. He just wanted to forget. But as conditions worsened, he realized he couldn't sit idly by while his people suffered. Slowly, reluctantly, he stepped up to help those around him. At first, it was small things: fixing broken equipment, sharing rations, but soon, people started looking to him for guidance. Before long, Kale found himself leading a group of desperate survivors, determined to find the archive and reclaim their place among the stars. Their journey took them through some of the harshest environments imaginable. They traveled through asteroid fields filled with jagged rocks that threatened to tear their ships apart. They navigated nebulae so thick with radiation that shields barely held up. Along the way, they encountered others like them humans struggling to survive after being cast aside by the Concord. Each meeting brought new challenges but also new allies. Together, they formed a loose coalition bound by necessity and shared hardship. Despite the growing sense of unity, not everyone agreed on how to move forward. Some argued for peace, believing that negotiation with the Concord was still possible. Others demanded revenge, convinced that violence was the only language the aliens would understand. Kale often found himself caught in the middle, torn between his desire to protect his people and his fear of repeating the mistakes that had led to their banishment in the first place. Then came the whispers of rebellion. Not everyone wanted to wait for the archive or rely on ancient secrets. A few outspoken voices began calling for action, urging their fellow humans to rise up against the Concord. Kale listened silently, unsure of what to think. Could they really fight back against such a powerful enemy? Or would resistance only lead to more suffering? As the coalition grew, so did the risks. Word of their activities eventually reached the Concord, and patrols began hunting for any sign of organized human activity. Kale knew they couldn't keep running forever. Sooner or later, they'd have to face the truth. Either they stood together and fought for their survival, or they faded into oblivion, forgotten by history. And so, with heavy hearts and uncertain futures, the banished humans pressed on. Each step brought them closer to answers and to danger. For Kale, the burden of leadership grew heavier with every passing day. Yet deep down, he clung to a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, humanity wasn't done yet. Maybe they still had a chance to prove that they deserved a place among the stars. The banished humans were scattered across the galaxy, drifting like leaves in a storm. With no home to return to and no allies to rely on, they clung to whatever scraps of hope they could find. For Kale and his small group, survival meant constantly moving. They couldn't stay in one place for too long, not with alien patrols hunting for them, and resources growing scarcer by the day. But as they traveled deeper into the unknown, something unexpected began to happen. Other humans started finding them. Their first encounter came near a crumbling space station orbiting a dead star. The station was little more than a skeleton now, its halls filled with rust and echoes. Kale's team had stopped there to scavenge what they could: old fuel cells, bits of machinery, anything useful. That's when they heard voices. At first, they thought it might be a trap set by raiders or even Concord agents. But as they cautiously approached, they realized the voices belonged to other humans. These newcomers were survivors from a colony that had been abandoned after the banishment. Their leader, a woman named Lyra, introduced herself with a mix of caution and relief. She explained how her people had managed to escape the initial crackdown, but were struggling to survive without proper supplies. When she learned about Kale's mission to find the hidden archive, her eyes lit up. "If there's a chance to change our fate," she said, "we're coming with you." Lyra wasn't just any survivor. She used to work as a diplomat for the Concord before the banishment. Her knowledge of alien politics and trade routes proved invaluable. She became part of Kale's inner circle almost immediately, offering advice and helping to broker uneasy alliances with other human groups they encountered along the way. Not everyone they met was so welcoming, though. On a desolate moon covered in jagged ice, they ran into Rin, a grizzled mercenary captain who led a band of ex-soldiers turned scavengers. Rin wasn't interested in talk of archives or rebellion. He cared only about staying alive and getting paid. He agreed to help Kale's group navigate the treacherous terrain in exchange for medical supplies, but his loyalty was clearly conditional. Still, Kale saw value in having someone like Rin around. His combat skills and experience made him a dangerous ally, and potentially an even more dangerous enemy if things went south. As their numbers grew, so did the challenges. Food shortages became a constant threat. Supplies dwindled faster than anyone expected, forcing them to make hard choices about who got what. Tempers flared and arguments broke out over whether they should focus on finding the archive or simply securing enough resources to keep everyone alive. Kale often found himself mediating disputes, trying to balance the needs of the group with the larger goal of reclaiming humanity's dignity. One day, while exploring an abandoned mining outpost, they stumbled upon another key figure, Dr. Elira Chun. She was a scientist who had once studied xenobiology, the study of alien life forms, but had been stranded when the Concord cut off all communication with human colonies. Dr. Chun was quiet and reserved, but her sharp mind quickly earned her respect within the group. She believed that understanding why the Concord feared humanity so much might hold the key to their survival. They didn't just banish us because of the accident, she told Kale one evening. There's something deeper here, something they don't want us to know. Her words stuck with Kale. He couldn't shake the feeling that the disaster on Elysian Prime hadn't been entirely accidental. Was it possible that the Concord had manipulated events to justify their actions? If so, what were they hiding? Despite these lingering questions, progress on finding the archive remained slow. Clues were scarce, and every lead seemed to end in disappointment. Then, during a tense standoff with a group of rogue AI drones guarding an old data vault, they finally caught a break. Deep within the vault, they discovered fragments of information pointing to the archive's location. It was buried inside a derelict starship, drifting dangerously close to a black hole, a place few would dare to go. The news reignited hope among the group, but it also brought new tensions. Some argued that risking their lives to chase a myth wasn't worth it. Others insisted that the archive was their only chance at redemption. Kale listened to both sides, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. In the end, he decided they had no choice but to try. Staying put meant waiting for death. Moving forward offered at least a sliver of possibility. Preparations for the journey were grueling. The black hole's gravitational pull made navigation nearly impossible, and the starship itself was likely falling apart after centuries of neglect. But Kale knew they couldn't turn back now. Every member of the group had sacrificed too much to give up. As they packed their gear and plotted their course, a sense of determination settled over them. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving that humanity still had a spark left, a will to fight for something greater than themselves. The closer they got to the black hole, the more surreal their surroundings became. Time seemed to stretch and warp, and strange lights danced across the void. Fear lingered in the air, but so did a quiet resolve. They were bound together, not just by necessity, but by a shared dream of reclaiming their place in the galaxy. When they finally reached the derelict starship, it loomed before them like a ghost, a massive skeletal vessel, drifting silent through the darkness. Boarding it felt like stepping into a tomb, but Kale pushed aside his unease. Somewhere inside this ship lay answers that could change everything, or destroy them. The derelict starship loomed before them, its jagged silhouette cutting through the endless blackness of space. It looked like something pulled straight out of a nightmare, a twisted, broken hulk drifting perilously close to the edge of a black hole. The gravitational pull was so strong that even their ship's engines groaned in protest as they inched closer. Every step felt heavier than the last, not just because of the physics, but because of the weight of what lay ahead. This wasn't just an old wreck. It was humanity's last hope. Kale stood at the helm, gripping the controls tighter than he realized. His knuckles were white, his jaw clenched. He could feel the eyes of his crew on him, some full of trust, others tinged with doubt. They had followed him this far, risking everything for the promise of answers. But what if there were no answers? What if all they found was more emptiness, more pain? Are we really doing this? Rin asked from behind him, his voice gruff and skeptical. That thing looks like it's about to fall apart. One wrong move, and we're all floating debris. It's our only shot, Cale replied without turning around. His tone was steady, though inside he wrestled with his own fears. We don't have a choice. Lyra stepped forward, her calm demeanor masking the storm of emotions beneath. She placed a hand on Cale's shoulder. He's right. If we turn back now, we lose more than just the archive. We lose ourselves. Her words carried a quiet strength, enough to silence any lingering protests. With a deep breath, Cale gave the order to dock. Their ship shuddered as it latched onto the ancient vessel, the metallic clang echoing like a death knell. The airlock hissed open, revealing a dark corridor beyond. Dust hung suspended in the stale air, illuminated faintly by the flickering light of their headlamps. The walls were scorched and pitted, evidence of battles long past. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't been peaceful. Dr. Chun took the lead, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. She scanned the walls with a handheld device, muttering under her breath. This ship, it's older than I thought. Centuries, maybe. Look at these markings, they're human. Not just human, but pre-Concord. This is Earth tech. Her discovery sent a ripple through the group. Earth was nothing more than a legend now, a cautionary tale whispered among the stars. To see proof of its existence, tangible and real, was overwhelming. For a moment, everyone forgot their fear and exhaustion. They pressed on, driven by a mix of awe and desperation. As they ventured deeper into the ship, the corridors grew narrower and darker. The floor creaked underfoot, and strange noises echoed around them. Metal groaning, distant thuds, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. It was easy to imagine ghosts haunting these halls, remnants of those who had once called this place home. But Cale knew better. Ghosts didn't exist. What haunted them was far worse. The truth. Finally, they reached what appeared to be the heart of the ship, a massive chamber filled with rows upon rows of data cores. Most of them were damaged, their surfaces cracked or melted. But a few still glowed faintly, pulsing with a soft blue light. Dr. Chun approached one cautiously, her hands trembling as she connected her device. These cores, they contain records. Records of humanity's earliest days in space. And, she paused, her voice dropping, records of the Concord's involvement. The room fell silent. Everyone gathered around as she began extracting the data. Fragment by fragment, the story unfolded. Humanity's rise among the stars hadn't been a triumph. It had been carefully orchestrated by the Concord. From the very beginning, humans had been manipulated, pushed into positions where failure was inevitable. The disaster on Elysian Prime wasn't an accident. It was part of a pattern, a way to justify banishing humanity once and for all. Cale listened, his chest tightening with each revelation. He had suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed hit him like a punch to the gut. So it was never about us being reckless, he said, his voice low and bitter. It was about control. They wanted us gone. And they succeeded, Rin added, his usual sarcasm replaced by grim resignation. Look at us. Banished, scattered, barely surviving. Mission accomplished. But Lyra shook her head. Not yet. Knowing the truth changes things. We can use this. Expose them. Show the galaxy what they've done. Her words sparked a fire in some, but others weren't convinced. Expose them how? One of the crew members demanded. We're fugitives. No one will listen to us. Even if they did, the Concord has armies, weapons, power. What do we have? We have the truth, Kale said firmly, and we have each other. That's more than we had before. The argument might have continued, but then the lights flickered. A loud crash echoed through the chamber, followed by the unmistakable sound of boots on metal. Someone or something was coming. Quick, grab as much data as you can. Doctor, Chun urged, her voice urgent. We need to get out of here. Panic spread through the group as they scrambled to collect the remaining intact cores. Kale stayed behind to cover their retreat, his weapon drawn. Shadows moved at the edges of his vision, distorted by the dim light. Then figures emerged, Concord soldiers, their armor gleaming despite the darkness. They had been tracked. Go! Kale shouted, firing a warning shot to buy time. The others hesitated, torn between loyalty and survival. But Kale's glare left no room for debate. Now, reluctantly, they obeyed, disappearing down the corridor with the precious data in tow. Kale held his ground, exchanging fire with the advancing soldiers. Each shot echoed like thunder, the noise amplified by the confined space. He was outnumbered and outgunned, but adrenaline kept him moving. Ducking behind a console, he reloaded and prepared for another volley. Then, out of nowhere, Rin appeared. You idiot! You think you're going to hold them off alone? I'm buying you time, Kale snapped, firing again. Get out of here. Rin didn't argue further. Instead, he grabbed Kale by the arm and yanked him toward the exit. Together, they sprinted through the twisting corridors, the sound of pursuit growing louder behind them. The ship groaned ominously, its structure straining against the black hole's pull. Pieces of the ceiling collapsed, forcing them to dodge. Falling debris, they reached the airlock just as the rest of the group sealed themselves inside their ship. Without hesitation, Kale and Rin leapt aboard, slamming the hatch shut behind them. The engines roared to life, and the ship lurched forward, breaking free of the derelict vessel's decaying orbit. Behind them, the starship drifted closer to the black hole, swallowed whole by the void. For a moment, no one spoke. They sat in stunned silence, catching their breath and processing what had just happened. The data cores lay piled on the table, glowing faintly in the dim light. They contained the truth, but also a burden. Now that they knew the Concord's secrets, there was no going back. Kale stared out the viewport, watching the black hole recede into the distance. His mind raced with possibilities. The Concord had tried to erase humanity, but they had failed. And now, armed with the truth, Kale and his people had a chance to fight back, not just for survival, but for justice. But as the adrenaline faded, doubt crept in. Could they really take on the most powerful force in the galaxy? Or would exposing the truth only make things worse? For now, though, those questions would have to wait. All that mattered was that they were alive, and that they had a purpose. The escape from the derelict starship felt like a miracle, but it came at a cost. Kale's body ached from the fight, his mind heavy with the weight of what they had uncovered. The data cores sat on the table in their makeshift meeting room, glowing faintly as if mocking them. They held answers, proof that humanity had been betrayed by the Concord, but also raised questions no one was ready to face. What did they do next? Could they even trust each other anymore? Tension simmered just below the surface. Some members of the group wanted to act immediately, to broadcast the truth across the galaxy and expose the Concord for what it truly was. Others argued that doing so would be suicide. If we go public now, Rin said, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, the Concord will crush us before we can blink. We're not an army. We're just leftovers. But staying quiet won't change anything. Lyra shot back, her voice sharp with frustration. We have proof. Proof that they've been lying to everyone, not just humans, for centuries. If we don't use it, then what was the point of risking our lives? Kale sat silently, listening to the arguments swirl around him. He wanted to believe they could win, but every fiber of his being told him this wasn't going to be easy. Concord controlled everything: the trade routes, the armies, the technology. Humanity was scattered, broken, and outnumbered. Even armed with the truth, they were still fighting an uphill battle. Dr. Chon broke the silence, her tone calm, firm. Before we decide anything, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. These cores contain more than just records of the past. There are maps, schematics, even mentions of secret projects the Concord has been working on. One of those projects might be our key to leveling the playing field. Her words sparked a flicker of hope in the room. Maybe they didn't need to take on the entire Concord head-on. Maybe there was a way to strike where it hurt most, a single blow that could weaken their grip on the galaxy. But first, they needed to dig deeper into the data dot as Dr. Chon worked tirelessly to decode the information. The rest of the group focused on survival. Supplies were running dangerously low again, and morale was fragile. Kale took charge of organizing scavenging missions, sending small teams to nearby ruins and abandoned outposts in search of food, fuel, and spare parts. Each mission carried risks, especially since Concord patrols were becoming more frequent. It was clear they were searching for the fugitives who had infiltrated the derelict starship. One evening, after another long day of repairs and rationing, Kale found himself staring at the stars through a cracked viewport. He thought about Earth, the planet he had never seen but had heard so much about. A wasteland now, but once a cradle of life and innovation. How had humanity gone from creating wonders to being cast aside like garbage? Was it really all the Concord's fault, or was there something deeper, a flaw within themselves that kept leading them to ruin? His thoughts were interrupted by Lyra, who joined him quietly. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside him, gazing out at the endless void. Finally, she spoke. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the galaxy on your shoulders." Kale let out a bitter laugh. "Feels like I am." "You're not alone, you know," she said softly. "Whatever happens next, we're in this together, all of us." Her words brought a strange comfort, though they couldn't erase the doubts gnawing at him. Before he could respond, the ship's alarms blared, jolting them both to attention. Someone shouted from the control room, "We've got company." Panic surged through the crew as they scrambled to their stations. On the monitors, several Concord ships appeared, closing in fast. Their sleek designs glinted menacingly in the light of a nearby star. Escape wasn't an option. They were surrounded. Kale clenched his fists, his mind racing. They couldn't fight. Their weapons were outdated, their shields barely holding up. But surrender wasn't an option either. Not after everything they'd been through. Then Dr. Chun burst into the room, clutching a datapad. "I found something," she exclaimed, "a weak point in their formation. If we target it, we can create enough chaos to slip away." Without hesitation, Kale gave the order. Do it. The plan was risky, relying on precision and timing. As the Concord ships moved into position, their own vessel fired a concentrated blast at the designated spot. The explosion rippled through space, throwing the enemy fleet into disarray. For a brief moment, a gap opened up and they seized it. Accelerating through the breach, with engines screaming out, it worked. Against all odds, they escaped. Cheers erupted throughout the ship, but Kale knew better than to celebrate too soon. This victory was temporary. The Concord would come after them. Again, harder and faster. And now, they had something the aliens desperately wanted: the data cores. Back in the safety of deep space, the group regrouped. Dr. Chun revealed more details from her analysis. Among the files, she discovered plans for a massive weapon being developed by the Concord, device capable of wiping out entire populations with a single strike. Worse still, it was designed specifically to target human DNA, ensuring that any survivors of the initial blast would succumb to radiation poisoning. This changes everything, Kale said grimly. They're planning to finish us off for good. Rin slammed his fist against the table. Then we hit them first. Find that weapon and destroy it before they can use it. It's not that simple, Lyra countered. Even if we find it, how do we get close enough to sabotage it? We're outnumbered and outgunned. We adapt, Kale replied. His voice was steady, resolute. We've survived this long because we've adapted. We'll keep doing what we've always done, find a way. The decision was made. They would launch a daring raid on the facility where the weapon was being built. It was located on a heavily fortified moon orbiting a gas giant, guarded by layers of defenses. Breaking in would require stealth, skill, and a fair amount of luck. But failure wasn't an option. If the weapon became operational, humanity's fate would be sealed. Preparations began immediately. Every member of the crew played a role, whether it was modifying their ship systems, crafting makeshift explosives, or practicing combat maneuvers. Kale spent hours poring over blueprints and strategizing with Dr. Chun, who insisted on joining the mission despite the danger. This is my work too, she said firmly. I'm not sitting this one out. As the day of the raid approached, emotions ran high. Fear, anger, determination all mingled together in a volatile mix. Kale gathered the team for one final briefing. Tomorrow, we put everything on the line, he told them. Not just for ourselves, but for every human out there. If we succeed, we give them a chance to fight back, to reclaim what's ours. Number one slept that night. Instead, they checked and rechecked their gear, shared quiet conversations, and stared at the stars, wondering if they would live to see another sunrise. When dawn finally arrived, or rather, when the artificial lights, mimicking dawn, flickered on, it brought a sense of inevitability. There was no turning back now. The journey to the moon was tense, the air thick with anticipation. As they approached the facility, the scale of their task became painfully clear. Towering walls bristling with turrets encircled the compound, while drones patrolled the skies above. Getting inside would be nearly impossible, but they had no choice. Using stolen codes and clever hacking, Dr. Chun managed to disable part of the security grid, creating a narrow window for infiltration. Under cover of darkness, the team slipped onto the surface, moving like shadows among the jagged rocks. Every step was calculated, every breath held. One wrong move, and they'd be caught. Inside the facility, the tension only grew worse. Alarms blared intermittently, forcing them to duck into hiding spots whenever guards passed by. At one point, Rin took out 2 patrol units with brutal efficiency, leaving behind no trace of their presence. Slowly but surely, they made there. Way deeper into the complex, guided by Dr. Chon's knowledge of the layout. Finally, they reached the heart of the operation, a cavernous chamber housing the weapon itself. It was monstrous, a towering machine pulsing with ominous energy. Wires snaked across the floor, connecting it to banks of computers and power sources. Destroying it wouldn't be easy, but they had planned for this moment. While Kale and Rin kept watch, Dr. Chun set to work planting charges at critical points. Her hands trembled slightly, but her focus never wavered. Almost done, she whispered, sweat dripping down her face. Suddenly, a shout echoed through the chamber. Guards had spotted them. Shots rang out, ricocheting off metal surfaces. Chaos erupted as the team fought back, buying precious seconds for Dr. Chun to finish her task. Just as the last charge was placed, she gave the signal. Go! Now! They sprinted toward the exit, explosions erupting behind them. The ground shook violently, debris raining down as the weapon collapsed in on itself. By the time they reached, Their ship, the entire facility, was engulfed in flames. As they soared away from the destruction, a collective sigh of relief washed over the crew. They had done it. Against all odds, they had struck a blow against the Concorde. But Cale knew this was only the beginning. The real fight was yet to come. The destruction of the Concorde's weapon was a victory, but it didn't bring peace. If anything, it made things worse. The explosion lit up the skies, visible from neighboring systems, and word spread quickly. The Concorde knew who was responsible, and their response was swift and merciless. Patrols intensified, blockades tightened, and rumors began to circulate about a new wave of retaliation aimed at wiping out humanity entirely. For Cale and his crew, there was no time to rest. Every moment counted. As they fled deeper into uncharted space. The weight of what they had done, and what still lay ahead, pressed heavily on them. They had struck a blow against the Concorde, but at what cost? Supplies were running dangerously. Low again, tempers flared, and the constant threat of discovery loomed over every decision. Yet, despite the exhaustion and fear, something remarkable began to happen. Hope started to spread. News of the raid reached other human colonies, carried by sympathetic traders and rogue signals. At first, skepticism reigned. Many thought the story was too good to be true, a desperate myth cooked up by banished survivors clinging to scraps of pride. But as more details emerged, the stolen data, the destroyed weapon, the courage of a small group willing to fight back, doubts turned into belief. And belief turned into action. One by one, scattered groups of humans began reaching out to Cale's crew. Messages crackled through static-filled comms, each one carrying stories of struggle and survival. Some offered resources. Others pledged fighters or ships. Slowly, a coalition began to form not just among the banished, but among all humans, who refused to accept their fate. For the first time in years, humanity had a shared purpose. A rebellion was born. Cale watched it unfold with a mix of awe and dread. He hadn't asked for this role, hadn't wanted it. He was just a man trying to survive, burdened by guilt and haunted by mistakes. But now, people looked to him for leadership. Strangers called him commander, their voices filled with respect or desperation. It terrified him, but it also gave him strength. These people weren't following him because he was perfect. They followed him because he represented something bigger than himself. Resilience. Lyra became his closest advisor, helping to organize the growing movement. She mapped out supply lines, coordinated communications, and negotiated alliances between factions that had once been enemies. Dr. Chun focused on analyzing the remaining data cores, searching for any advantage they could use against the Concorde. Rin, ever the reluctant participant, trained volunteers in combat tactics, turning farmers and engineers into soldiers overnight, but not everyone agreed on how to proceed. Some argued for an immediate assault on the Concorde's central hub, a bold strike to reclaim their place in the galaxy. Others urged caution, warning that such a move would be suicide without proper preparation. Debates raged late into the night, voices rising and falling like waves. Through it all, Cale tried to keep the group united, reminding them of why they were fighting, not just for revenge, but for a future where humanity could stand tall again. Then came the moment that changed everything. During one of Dr. Chun's analyses, she uncovered something buried deep within the archives, a recording from Earth's final days. It wasn't just a message, it was a warning. Scientists from centuries ago spoke of a looming cosmic threat, something ancient and unstoppable that had been dormant for eons. The Concorde, it seemed, had known about this threat all along and had chosen to prepare for it alone, using humanity's banishment as a way to buy time, or so they claimed. Cale listened to the recording in stunned silence. The implications were staggering. If the threat was real, then humanity's fight wasn't just about reclaiming their dignity, it was about survival. About proving that they deserved a seat at the table when the galaxy faced its greatest challenge. Armed? With this knowledge, Kale made a decision. They would confront the Concord, not with weapons, but with truth. The rebellion would launch a daring infiltration mission, targeting the heart of the Concord's government. Their goal wasn't destruction, but exposure. They would broadcast the archive's contents to every corner of the galaxy, revealing the Concord's lies and forcing them to acknowledge humanity's worth. The plan was risky, almost suicidal. The Concord's capital world was the most heavily fortified location in known space, protected by fleets of warships and armies of soldiers. Getting inside would require every ounce of skill, cunning, and luck they possessed. But Kale believed it was their only chance. If we fail, he told the group, then we die knowing we tried. If we succeed, we change everything. Preparations took weeks. Ships were modified, disguises crafted, and escape routes meticulously planned. Volunteers poured in from across the galaxy, drawn by the promise of redemption. Among them were faces Kale recognized from old colonies, from Elysian Prime, even from the derelict starship where it all began. Each one carried their own scars, their own reasons for joining the fight. Together, they formed a patchwork army, united by hope and determination. The day of the mission arrived under a sky painted with stars. As the fleet assembled, Kale stood on the bridge of their lead ship, staring out at the vast expanse before them. His mind raced with doubts, fears, memories. What if they were wrong? What if the Concord's fears about humanity were justified? But then he remembered the faces of those who had joined him, the sacrifices they had made, the dreams they carried. Humanity wasn't perfect, but neither was anyone else. Perfection wasn't the point. Survival was. Growth was. Redemption was. With a deep breath, he gave the order. Let's go. The journey to the capital world was tense, every second stretching into eternity. When they reached orbit, the Concord's defenses sprang to life, cannons blazing and ships swarming like insects. But the rebels had anticipated this. Using decoys and clever maneuvers, they created openings in the blockade, slipping through gaps with precision honed by countless hours of practice. By the time the Concord realized what was happening, it was too late. Inside the capital, chaos erupted. Kale led a small team through labyrinthine corridors, dodging patrols and disabling security systems. Every step brought them closer to the council chamber, where the Concord's leaders awaited. Along the way, they encountered resistance, but also unexpected allies. Some alien guards, disillusioned by the Concord's corruption, chose to side with the rebels. Others simply stepped aside, unwilling to die for a cause they no longer believed in. Finally, they reached the chamber. The doors slid open to reveal the council, seated in a circle beneath a domed ceiling. At its center stood the Overseer, the enigmatic figure who had orchestrated humanity's banishment. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. You shouldn't have come here, the Overseer said, their voice calm but laced with menace. You've sealed your fate. Kale stepped forward, holding up the datapad containing the archive's contents. No, he replied. We're sealing yours. The galaxy deserves to know the truth. Before the Overseer could respond, the transmission began. Images and recordings flooded the airwaves, reaching every planet, every station, every outpost. The Concord's manipulations, their secret projects, their betrayal of humanity, all laid bare for the universe to see. Gasps echoed through the chamber as the council members watched, their expressions shifting from shock to shame. When the broadcast ended, the room fell silent. Then, slowly, the Overseer spoke. You think this changes anything? The threat is still coming. Without unity, we are all doomed. Kale nodded. Then let us unite, not as masters and servants, but as equals. Humanity has proven it can rise above its flaws. Let us prove it again together. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, one by one, the council members rose from their seats, bowing their heads in acknowledgement. The Concord's grip on the galaxy had been broken not by force, but by truth. The months that followed, humanity was granted provisional membership back into the galactic community. It wasn't easy. Rebuilding trust took time, effort, and sacrifice. But for the first time in generations, humans walked among the all. Stars not as outcasts, but as partners. Kale stepped down as leader, passing the torch to a new generation. He returned to the stars, traveling quietly, watching as humanity began to heal. On quiet nights, he gazed at the constellations, remembering the journey that had brought them here. Mistakes had been made, losses endured, but they had survived. And in surviving, they had found hope. The galaxy was vast, full of wonders and dangers alike. But somewhere out there, amidst the endless possibilities, humanity had carved out a place for itself, not as conquerors or victims, but as dreamers. And that, Kale thought, was enough.